One day, my daughter was hospitalized with a very high fever. I was feeling pretty lonely with all these emotions of anxiety, fear, and sadness, and I wanted my husband to be there with me. So I called him, but I couldn't reach him on the phone. I had no choice but to call his office. Then things took an unexpected turn because the receptionist told me that he was on paid leave until New Year's. What was strange was that he had told me he was going on a business trip until then. At that moment, I knew exactly what was going on. My husband had lied to me about the business trip and was instead going on a trip of adultery. And the worst part was that he was having an affair. But with someone I never expected would betray me in that way. Mark my words, my friends, I'm going to put you both into the dark depths of hell or die trying if I must. Never am I going to let you get away with all the pain you caused me and my loving daughter. Fortunate, my name is Rachel, and I'm a 30-year-old housewife. I used to live with my husband, Martin, and my daughter, Karina. Martin and I initially had a senior-junior relationship back in high school, and we met often because I was a student manager of the basketball team, the same one that Martin played for. It didn't take long for me to admire him hugely after meeting him in high school. He sadly went off to university after he graduated, but we kept in touch throughout the years. And I was eventually blessed with the opportunity to meet him again when I started working at the same company he was. He became my personal mentor, showing me the ins and outs of the work I was assigned to do. I had always had a crush on him, so I approached him with a burning determination. With the help of Daphne, who had joined the company at the same time as I did and provided some much-needed advice about how to catch the attention of a guy, we were able to start a relationship together. From then on, things went very smoothly, and we got married after 15 months of being together. When we had our daughter Karina, my husband asked me to quit my job and concentrate on taking care of his home and raising her. I thought about continuing work, but I decided to follow my husband's wishes and quit my job to become a full-time housewife, caring for the house and raising my loving daughter. After the baby was born, however, my husband suddenly became distant, and I had a feeling something was off. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. And I was right. I later found out that my husband had been cheating on me with a coworker. I was devastated and hurt, but I knew I had to be strong for my daughter. I couldn't let my husband's actions destroy me and my family. So I made the decision to leave him and start anew. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right thing to do. Now I'm focused on rebuilding my life and providing the best possible future for my daughter. I won't let my husband's betrayal define me or my daughter's happiness. I will rise above it and come out even stronger on the other side. Following my husband's wishes, I quit my job to become a full-time housewife, caring for the house and raising my loving daughter. After the baby was born, however, my husband suddenly became busy and did not participate in childcare. Whenever I asked him to help me out with Karina, mostly because I was doing some housework right when she needed attention, he always said something along the lines of, "I don't know what I'm supposed to do at home. Seeing how you're the expert around here, I'll just leave it to you. I honestly think Martin had only ever held his daughter about as many times as I can count on one hand, and additionally, I don't feel that signature kindness as much as I used to lately. The lack of Tarav was so bad that I occasionally got worried about whether or not he still loved our daughter. He genuinely loved me. I even became depressed at times because of this doubt. Where was the husband I loved? The Martin who was a really good and kind man. The man who never failed to show me compassion and never acted cold towards me. Although I resisted doing so for a long time, I finally gave in to the idea of complaining about the situation to my old colleague Daphne. That's when she cured me and said, "I'm sure he's just tired and tense because of work, honey. He's shouldering a lot of responsibility here at work, and he can finally relax and be how he wants to be at home." An HST 8-min and sick. That's what I think. I can't believe that losing his determination to be kind to his wife and to seemingly not care about his own daughter is how he wants to be at home after a tiring day's work. Doesn't participate in raising our child at all, and we don't ever talk when he's home. I envy you, Daphne. You're about to get married, so you must be so in love with your fiancé now, aren't you?
I'm sure he's just tired and tense because of work, honey. Then, he don't have anyhow shouldering a lot of responsibility here at work, and he can finally relax and be how he wants to be at home. That's what I think.
He can't believe that losing his determination to be kind to his wife and to seemingly not care about his own daughter is how he wants to be at home after a tiring day's work. He doesn't participate in raising our child at all, and we don't ever talk when he's home. I envy you, Daphne. You're about to get married. So you must be so in love with your fiancé now, aren't you? Then we had a casual chat and hung up after approximately 15 minutes. Daphne's words made sense to me, and I pulled myself together. I made more of an effort to have more conversations with my husband because I knew there was something I could do to help our relationship get back on track. One day, my husband had to go on an urgent business trip, so I sent him off early in the morning. He prepared breakfast for me and Karina. That day was a national holiday, and she didn't have kindergarten. My daughter seemed lonely when she heard that her daddy had to go on a business trip, so promised to take her shopping. Ambience. Breakfast was going to be her favorite. Mini fruities. These were essentially tiny oatmeal pancakes with fruit, and it was an interesting little recipe I discovered as I was scrolling through some popular cooking posts on social media. Basically, you literally dip thin slices of fruit like bananas, strawberries, kiwis, apples, and tangerines into the pancake batter and cook them individually. It was really cool because you eat them hot with maple syrup and brown sugar, or you could freeze them and eat them with milk as a kind of cereal. Karina loved pancakes in general, but she especially up to these mini fruities with maple syrup and a glass of milk. But that morning, she didn't wake up at all. When I saw that she woke up long after she usually did, she climbed down the stairs, said, Mommy," and fell face first onto the floor. I thought she might have fallen down, so I rushed to her and called to her. "Karina, are you okay? Did you fall down?" Only when I picked her up did I discover she felt so hot to the touch. She had a very high fever, and her falling down wasn't the result of her tripping on something. She had actually fainted. I checked her pulse, and the rhythm was pretty erratic. I panicked for an instant but told myself I had to calm down. I then called an ambulance, and they took her to the hospital. She had an IV put into her arm, and her vitals calmed down soon thereafter. Turns out the fever had caused her to sweat so much, and the result was acute dehydration. The IV provided enough fluids to keep her stable, but her body temperature was still pretty high. That day, I had to stay in the hospital to stay with her in case she woke up. Once my daughter was stable and transported to a hospital room where she could sleep soundly and recover, I called Martin, but for some reason I couldn't get through to him. My husband worked in sales, so he usually could answer his phone right away. At the time, he was on a business trip, so it was even more obvious that he should have answered. The shock of seeing my daughter collapse face first to the floor left me really worried about her for the rest of the day, and I just wanted to hear Martin's voice. I didn't know where he was. The first thought that occurred to me was that he might still be at his office. So I called and asked the receptionist if he was at work. But then, the kind girl on the phone told me something vivid. Dange.
Your husband is using his paid holidays until New Year's, ma'am.
Wait, excuse me? Never mind. I'm sorry. Everything's fine. But then I hung up the phone. I was really confused and didn't even know where to begin to unravel this web of contradictions. My husband is supposed to be on a business trip, and there was quite a bit of time. A little over 2 weeks, in fact, before New Year's. I couldn't understand how he could get paid leave for all of that. Then I had another idea. I called my old friend Daphne, partly because I was worried and lonely, and I wanted to hear someone's voice to console me, and partly because I thought she might know something about his whereabouts.
Let's go down, honey.
Daphne heard me crying over the phone and kindly became worried about me. It's about my daughter, Karina. She was taken to the hospital because she fainted due to a really high fever.
Oh my goodness, is she alright?
She's stable for now, and I tried calling Martin, but I couldn't reach him for whatever reason. Of all times, now is when I can't get in touch with him, and I don't know where he is physically. I tried calling the office too.
Martin is on a business trip today, after all. I remember overhearing some of his superiors talking about how he was going to a rural area for a couple weeks. I think the phone signal there is bad. Oh, so I'm sure he'll call you back in a little while, honey.
That's what she said. Funny, the girl who answered the phone when I called his office said that he was getting paid leave for nearly 2 weeks, and Daphne herself worked in the same department as him. So there's no way she didn't know that he was. But it's not just this. There was something else that was bothering me about Daphne's potential relationship with Martin. I knew what I said to both of them individually. I knew what I said to Martin, and only to Martin, and likewise for Daphne. For some reason, Daphne's tone implied that she knew something more than what I had told her, something that I had only told Martin. I knew what I said to both of them individually. I knew what I said to Martin, and only to Martin, and likewise for Daphne. For some reason, Daphne's tone implied that she knew exactly what I told Martin, and once that idea planted itself in my mind, I could only conclude one thing. My husband and my best friend were seeing each other outside of the office. I decided to experiment a little with Daphne right at that moment. I asked, "Hey Daphne, where are you right now?"
I'm at home, honey.
I know it might be hard for you right now, but could you come to the hospital? That question definitely struck a nerve. I could hear my friend's heavy breathing over the phone. I asked, "Are you up someone right now?"
You see, I'm planning my wedding with Kian right now, so it would be difficult for me to abandon that and go to the hospital.
Well, why don't we do a video phone call? I think I'll feel more at ease if I see your face as I talk to you. Daphne hesitated, then replied,
Sorry, honey, I'm right in the middle of a meeting with the marriage bureau right now. Exercising though brewing.
Then all hell broke loose when I heard a very familiar voice behind her. My husband's voice. That voice definitely belonged to my husband. Perhaps she thought that I heard that voice because she immediately said with a slightly urgent tone of voice, "My husband is calling for me. Are you going to be okay, honey?" Daphne was trying her best to cover it up, but there was no way she could fake it. I already knew the truth. I've been dreaming about Martin ever since I was but a 16-year-old schoolgirl with wild fantasies of passionate love and commitment. Not a day went by hoping I could eventually call him my man. And that meant I sure as hell never forgot what his voice sounds like. I was so shocked. Daphne, who was a friend close enough to actually be my best friend, had betrayed me. I thought about just interrogating her right then and there, but I realized there were many ways out of the situation on her part. I tried to keep my composure as I replied, "Looks like Karina's waking up, Daphne. I have to go now. I just hope my loving husband will call me." I said that and hung up the phone as I went back to my daughter's room. I was shocked that my husband had betrayed me, but seeing my daughter appearing so limp in that hospital bed with plastic tubes going into her right arm made me think I didn't have time to worry about their betrayal. The IV had helped some, but once she felt the full force of the fever, it must have been too much for her to bear. I held her hand and hoped with all my heart that she would recover in no time.
I'm here, Rachel. Are you okay? Is Karina alright? Here, I only called you, Martin. You never picked up the phone. How do you even know why I called? The sheer number of calls I got in my inbox made me figure it must be about Karina, honey. Please tell me nothing happened to her.
Yeah, Daphne must have told you anyway. Is what I would have said if I let my shock and anger take over. But I knew better. This was a situation where I had to keep calm, endure the talking with the traitors, and make it appear as though I don't know anything at all, even though I already know everything. Once I realized the truth, I felt nothing but disgust towards anything my husband said. Anyway, I decided to test Martin too, just as I did when I tested Daphne. Karina's in the hospital right now, Martin, and she's not doing very well. The poor thing could really use her daddy there for her. Won't you please come to the hospital?
Oh, Rachel, I can't right now because I'm working. Karina will be at ease enough if you're there, And there are nurses at the hospital that take good care of her, so I'll leave it to you since there'll be anything for me to do there if I do go.
In translation, I'm actually having so much fun on this trip of adultery with your best friend right now, and I couldn't care less about my own daughter in the hospital, because the only thing I care about is myself. What's about now is Daphne? Okay, I admit that's a bit of a stretch, but what he said made me think he didn't care about his family. With this reaction of my husband, my feelings for him suddenly went stone cold, and I no longer felt any love or affection towards him. I just said, I understand, before I hung up the phone. After that, I started to conjure up a plan to put him and Daphne down into the dark depths of hell itself. I needed to show Martin what happens when one betrays their family, and I needed to show Daphne that friendship is never something to take for granted, and what someone who deliberately stole another's husband away. Betraying one's family is unacceptable, and I needed to show Daphne that friendship is never something to take for granted. Those who deliberately steal another's husband away will face consequences. Just you wait, you traitors. I will make sure you pay for your treason, and I will give you the misery that awaits snakes in the grass like you. I made sure my daughter was sleeping and checked my husband's social media. We didn't follow each other, but I knew my husband was on social media. Now, when I added contacts, other people who also knew their contact information often came up in the "Oh people you might know" section. My husband himself, of course, was there, so I looked at his posting history. I literally only had to scroll once to find. He had posted photos that looked like he was on vacation with a woman. I couldn't see their faces, which frustrated me because I couldn't determine who it was that he was cheating on me with. But then, I found a definitive photo. Much like the previous photos, both of their faces were covered, but a bag I had given to Daphne as a birthday present when intoxication and turmoil and teases. I was still working at the company was prominently in the photo. While this confirmed the affair once and for all for me, there was a high chance that legal organizations would find this substantial evidence, so I decided to hire a professional. My intention to divorce was set in stone, and no amount of apology or counterarguments would ever change my mind. Once I hired the detective agency, they gathered a lot of evidence within a few short days. Most of the proof came in photographs, and I was not shocked when I saw them. All I felt was fury. Fury at how my best friend was willing to betray not just me, but her own fiancé, and fury at how my husband deliberately sold his own family down the river. This is my fury at how my best friend was willing to betray not just me, but her own fiancé, and fury at how my husband deliberately sold his own daughter down the river. Made me hope to exact my revenge on him. I didn't really care anymore about how he'd abandoned me for the love of another woman, but abandoning his little girl. My little girl, that was worthy of the worst punishment known to man. After his trip with Daphne was over, my husband came home with an innocent look on his face, saying, "Hey Karina, darling, how are you feeling?" He walked up to our daughter, and with a smile on his face, said, Well, you're looking very healthy, Karina. I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear you're doing better. But Rachel, I think you were a bit imposing when you called the ambulance for something seemingly harmless like this. He was actually laughing. I was really pissed off, but I calmed down for the time being and did the household chores as usual, then put my daughter to bed. My husband was taking a bath right around then, so I called Daphne. Her tone sounded fraught with concern, whether it was for the well-being of Karina or for her situation regarding her affair with Martin. I couldn't tell.
Was Karina okay? How's she now?
She's doing a lot better now, Daphne. Thanks for asking, but I actually called you because I wanted to ask you something. When was your wedding again?
On a Saturday 3 months from now.
Great. My husband and I will be there. Oh, I'm sure Martin's going to be busy around then, given it's going to be the period to prepare for the newcomers. I'm sure he can scrape enough time to come to the wedding with me. I'll make sure I'll be there with him. I'll wait for the invitation.
I understand. Oh, I just remembered. I just remembered. I've been meaning to ask you something, too. I'd like to ask you to give a speech, as my closest friend at the wedding.
I honestly felt really lucky. This wedding was going to be when everything culminated, and it was too perfect. I knew Daphne didn't have many close friends, so I always knew she would ask me to be her representative as her closest friend. I decided to go through with my plan for vengeance on the day of the wedding, and the wedding day arrived a lot quicker than one would expect. Daphne enters the room in a beautiful wedding dress, and she was beaming, proud and happy. Her husband, Kian, was also smiling with an admiring warmth when he saw her in all her splendor. Needless to say, I felt really sorry for her new husband, who didn't know anything about her true colors. Of course, my husband, as well as Daphne's boss, was present at the wedding. My patience was wearing thin. Everything that I'd ever worked on, from hiring the detective agency to gather all the evidence to contacting the marriage bureau to cooperate with the plan and negotiating the arrangements, as well as a bunch of other preparations, like what I was going to wear and stuff like that, but was about to all come together, and the result was going to be a glorious catastrophe. And now, my friends, doom is upon you. I climbed up the steps and stood behind the microphone. I tapped it twice, uttered a few words to check if the sound was working, and proceeded to say, "My dear Daphne and the very lucky gentleman Kian, congratulations on your marriage. Me and Daphne were once colleagues at work, but our relationship was always more than that. She was my mentor, my friend, the darling sister I never had. I thought our friendship would last forever. But that all changed when I found out she was having an affair with my husband, Mr. Martin Upshaw." No sooner had I uttered the words "having an affair with my husband" that the audience was sent a flutter. I signaled to the lady with whom I'd negotiated the arrangements of my little wedding. A surprise for the newlyweds, and a photo slideshow on the large screen started to show much photographic evidence of my statement. Once I had finished playing the images, which in total took about 30 seconds, I proceeded to say, "I would never forgive you two traitors." Not once I said those 7 words, the fuming Daphne came storming down from her platform.
Oh, you freaking bitch, what the hell was all that about?
Oh my, did you not enjoy that little slideshow I prepared just for you? Well, just in case you didn't, I have a couple of pictures of you and Martin that I got from a detective agency. Briefly, I very sarcastically offered her the photos, and she brushed it away aggressively and glared at me through clenched teeth and murderous eyes. And
Hey, Rachel. What the frick is the matter with you? You better explain what the meaning of all this. You're not, like, freaking possessed by a demon or anything, right? I really don't get why you'd do such a thing.
I actually knew all about my wife's affair. I'd like the wedding go on as planned, because I thought it would cause trouble for all the guests. If I canceled it, I was going to file for a divorce after the ceremony.
Like, you're the worst kind of person to ruin someone's wedding, you stupid, slimy freaking whore.
You have no right to blame her. What you've done is even worse. You be quiet and woman up to your responsibilities.
Daphne was so startled at her husband yelling at her that she fell into an intense silence. Then Mr. Ireland, the boss of Daphne and Martin, calmly stood up with a solemn look on his face.
I need to talk to you guys after the holidays.
That was all he said before he left. The guests left one after another, taking their congratulatory wedding gifts with them. Only Daphne, her parents, Kian, his parents, me, and my husband remain at the scene following the disaster. Mr. and Mrs. Jordan, Daphne's parents, apologized so wholeheartedly to me and to Kian. Mr. and Mrs. Calcraft, Kian's parents, were visibly furious, especially Mrs. Calcraft. The Jordans were making their daughter get down on her knees and apologize to everyone for causing so much trouble. But I ignored all of her apologies because I no longer had any intention to forgive her for what she did. But I did feel sorry for one thing. I turned to the Calcrafts and bowed my own head in apology. I am so sorry for ruining Mr. Kian's wedding as a form for compensation for the catastrophe we've caused. My husband will pay for the entire cost of this wedding. I turned to Martin next. As for my demands for alimony and child support, I'll be filing a claim through my lawyer. The same will go for you, Daphne. That's all I said, and I left the hall. After that, I left and went back to my parents' house. I hired a lawyer and filed for alimony against Martin and Daphne and child support for Martin. I got all the alimony I demanded from both of them, and even now, 2 years later, Martin still continues to pay $600 in child support every month. Because his affair with Daphne was now out of the bag, he had the intention of remarrying Daphne after we got divorced. Unfortunately for him, she had a completely different plan in mind.
Kiana, I don't want to leave you. Everything I ever did with this bastard, was just fun and games. I love you, Ken, and no one else. I always have, and I always will,
Oh, what the hell? You said you loved me. Oh, come on now, don't tell you actually believed that load of bullshit. Tian's good looking, and in his income, it has an entire world of difference from yours. I'd never let him go, and you also said you just wanted to see how Rachel would react. I didn't ask for you to become so freaking committed to me. Now having you around is just to be a hassle. You've got to be kidding me. And after I betrayed my entire family for you?
And then we're getting a divorce, Daphne. I'm gonna charge you both alimony too, so I suggest you prepare yourself well. for that.
With that said, he left the hall with his parents, and Martin, Daphne, and her parents were the only people left in the wedding hall, which seemed to have turned into a literal slice of hell. In the end, my husband and Daphne's infidelity was discovered by the company. They were both transferred to rural branches in the country. Martin was sent to the north, and Daphne was sent down to the Midwest, and it seems they're never going to see each other again. Their new workplaces also found out about their affair, and it seems that they both find themselves in a very difficult situation. My husband paid Daphne and me a total of $60,000 in alimony and still pays $600 a month in child support. Daphne, of course, is also being sued for alimony and is having a hard time making ends meet. They are now both well known in the company as the Backstabbers, with a description saying that they were two terrible people who had an affair with each other despite being married. So there is no one to take care of them, and they are living in new, unfamiliar places where they don't know anyone. Lonely, miserable are both understatements when it comes to describing how their lives are going. As for me and my daughter Karina, we are living happily at her grandparents' home. We received quite a bit of money from the alimony and child support. So my top priority nowadays is spending time with my daughter for a while. Eventually, I plan to go back to work to provide enough for my daughter to grow into a strong, beautiful, independent woman with a heart of compassion and a mind full of logic and common sense. To secure a better job, I recently started studying for some certifications in bookkeeping. Although I'll be a single mom, I won't let her be lonely. I'll always be there for her.